I never wanted to become the kind of person who stands in the middle of a courtroom holding a giant map, pointing at a cluster of 88 shining pretty houses and saying, "All of this is mine." But that's exactly where I found myself. The judge's eyes widened. The HOA board members froze like statues. The lawyers who once smirked at me suddenly looked like they swallowed hot soup. And the crowd in the courtroom gasped when I placed the old, dusty deed on the table, the one that proved the truth they never expected. The truth that the entire neighborhood was sitting on my land. The truth I had kept quietly for months, watching everything unfold. The truth that was about to shake the whole town. But just as the judge leaned forward and said, "Mr. Howard, this deed changes everything," the courtroom doors burst open. Cliffhanger. Now, let me take you back to how all of this even started. I wasn't a rich man. I wasn't a powerful man. I was just Tom Howard, a 7-year-old handyman who liked planting tomatoes, fixing my old truck, and feeding the birds every morning. I had lived on the same land my grandfather left me, a beautiful stretch of green hills, a small pond, and a big old barn that leaned sideways like it had stories of its own. People always said I was too kind, too patient, too trusting. And maybe they were right. Because when the HOA first arrived, I didn't even know what an HOA was. I just saw a group of people dressed in fancy shirts and shiny shoes walk through my property with clipboards, talking like they owned the place. I remember stepping out of my barn that morning, wiping dust from my hands. "Howdy," I said with a smile. "Can I help you folks?" A tall woman with red hair didn't smile back. "We're surveying," she said. "You're on HOA property boundaries. You'll need to adjust your structures." I laughed because I thought it was a joke. "My barn has been here since 1952, I said. "Nothing to adjust." She didn't laugh. Another man pushed his glasses up his nose and said, "This area is part of our development plan." I blinked. "Your what?" "Our community expansion." I looked around the hills, the trees, the fresh morning air. "You mean, here?" He nodded like it was obvious. That was the first moment something felt wrong, but I shrugged it off. I believed in kindness. I believed in trying to understand people. I didn't want to start a fight, but a few days later, the trucks came. Big trucks, loud trucks. Trucks with claws and drills and machines that kicked up dust that made my eyes sting. I rushed outside, waving my hands. "What are you all doing?" I yelled over the engines. A worker shouted back, "Clearing land for construction." I felt my stomach twist. This is my land. But the tall, red-haired woman, her name was Karen Lockridge, the HOA president, walked up to me, holding papers. "This land," she said, tapping the paper, "was rezoned. You don't own this section." I stared at the papers. They looked official. They looked important. But something didn't feel right. "My deed says otherwise," I whispered. She smiled, but not the warm kind. "Your deed must be outdated." And just like that, the machines roared back to life, and the digging continued. It was the first time in years I felt powerless. But I didn't shout. I didn't fight. I didn't threaten. I observed. I watched as the HOA fenced parts of my land. I watched as concrete slabs were poured. I watched as houses began rising, one by one, day by day. At first, it was just a few. Then a dozen. Then 50. Then all 88. 88 homes standing proudly on land they claimed was theirs. People moved in. Kids ran across my fields. Cars filled the streets that used to be my quiet walking paths. And every time I tried to talk to someone from the HOA, they brushed me off like dust on a windowsill. Some nights, I sat on my porch with a cup of tea, staring at the rows of bright new houses. I felt small. I felt forgotten. And yet, I didn't hate them. Not the families. Not the kids laughing. Not the people who had no idea they were living on stolen land. I believed in kindness. I believed in patience. I believed that doing the right thing mattered. So instead of fighting them with anger, I fought them with information. Quietly. Carefully. Smartly. I went back to my grandfather's old trunk in the attic. Inside, wrapped in cloth, was the original deed to the land, the one from 1935, written in thick ink and sealed with a courthouse stamp. It showed clear boundaries, clear measurements, clear ownership. And every single one of those new houses sat right inside those lines. My hands shook as I traced the map. "They lied," I whispered. And for the first time in months, hope sparked inside me. For weeks, I gathered proof, quietly, without telling a soul. I visited the county office. I checked old surveys. I spoke to the oldest folks in town who remembered when the land was untouched. Piece by piece, the truth came together. And the truth was powerful. But I didn't rush. I didn't storm the HOA office. Instead, I waited. Silently, calmly. I waited until they made their biggest mistake. One morning, Karen from the HOA marched up to my door with a stern face. "You need to remove your barn," she said. "It violates community guidelines." I almost laughed. "My barn? On my land?" She pointed sharply. "This is HOA property. You're lucky we haven't fined you yet." And that was it. That was the day I decided the waiting was over. I filed the case. I presented the deed. And soon, that courtroom was full. The HOA came with their lawyers. I came with a folder and a quiet heart. But before the truth could be revealed, before the storm could hit them, the courtroom doors burst open and someone rushed in shouting my name. And that's where we'll pause. What happens next changes everything. Before we continue, tell me, where are you watching from? The doors slammed open so hard that even the judge flinched. Every head in the courtroom turned. My heart pounded, because the person rushing in wasn't a stranger. It was Mr. Ellis, the oldest man in our town, walking with his cane like it was a sword and his breath like fire. His white hair stood up like he had been running, and his eyes locked straight on me. "Tom," he shouted, pointing a shaky finger. "Don't you say another word until I speak." Gasps filled the room. The HOA board members whispered among themselves. Karen's smile twitched, just barely, like she knew something was wrong, very wrong. The judge adjusted his glasses. "Sir, this is highly irregular. Who are you to interrupt these proceedings?" Mr. Ellis didn't wait to be invited. He marched right up to the front, stopping beside me. "I'm the last living witness to the original land survey of 1963, he said, breathing heavily. "And I know the truth about this land." The room erupted in shocked murmurs. But before he could continue, the judge struck his gavel. "Order, order in the court." I touched Mr. Ellis's arm gently. "You didn't have to rush here," I whispered. He shook his head. "Boy, you don't understand. They think they're slick. They think nobody remembers what they did." His voice dropped to a rough whisper. "But I do." Karen from the HOA quickly stood up. "Your Honor, this is ridiculous," she snapped. "This old man clearly isn't reliable. This hearing is about Mr. Howard falsely claiming—" The judge cut her off. "Sit down, Miss Lockridge." She froze, stunned. It was the first time she hadn't been in control. Mr. Ellis pulled out a tiny folded paper from his pocket. It was old, older than even my grandfather's deed. He raised it in the air. "This is the missing survey marker map that shows the original property stakes. It proves that Tom's land stretches past the creek, past the hill, and straight into what you all call Oak Ridge Meadows." Every HOA member stiffened like statues. I stared at the paper. My mouth felt dry. "But I thought all the old county records burned in the fire." "Not this one." His eyes softened. "Your grandfather trusted me to keep a copy. Said one day, someone might need the truth." I swallowed hard. For a moment, I forgot the courtroom, the HOA, the houses built across my land. All I could think about was the memory of my grandfather sitting on the porch, telling me to always treat land like it's a living thing, something to protect. Before Mr. Ellis could hand the map to the judge, a loud voice echoed from the back of the room. "Objection!" It was the HOA's lawyer, a man in a sharp black suit with a tie so stiff it looked painful. He strutted forward like he owned the place. "Your Honor, this is all nonsense. These are ancient documents, unsupported by modern zoning. This man is confusing everyone." The judge turned calm eyes toward him. "Sit down, counselor. I will allow the document to be reviewed." The lawyer's face turned red as he sat down, slamming his folder shut. Then came the moment that changed the energy of the entire courtroom. As Mr. Ellis handed the old map to the judge, Karen suddenly stepped forward. "This is outrageous!" she cried. "This land was ours to develop. The town approved our plans." "But did they?" the judge asked quietly, studying the paper. "Or did you simply act before ensuring full property verification?" Karen opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time, she looked nervous, truly nervous. I noticed her hands trembling. The judge leaned back. "We will take a short recess while I compare this document with the deed provided by Mr. Howard." A wave of relief washed over me. For months, I had been ignored, brushed aside, pushed around. Now, finally, the truth was reaching the surface. But as the judge stood to leave, something happened that made every muscle in my body freeze. From the back corner of the courtroom, a deep voice said loudly, "Your Honor, if you are comparing documents, Then you should also see this. Everyone turned. A tall man in a gray hoodie and jeans stepped forward, holding a thick envelope. I recognized him instantly. He had once worked for the HOA, but suddenly quit months ago. Rumors said he left because he didn't agree with something. I never knew what that meant. Now I knew. He walked slowly to the front, eyes locked on Karen, whose face drained of color. I kept copies of every email, he said. Every blueprint, every approval form, every message, showing you knew the land wasn't yours. The courtroom fell silent. Dead silent. The judge froze mid-step. The HOA lawyer's jaw dropped. And Karen, she looked like she might faint. The man placed the envelope on the judge's desk. Everything is in here. My heart raced. Because this wasn't just evidence. This was proof of something darker. Something bigger. Something no one expected. And just as the judge reached for the envelope, the tall man leaned closer and whispered something that made the judge's eyes widen. "Check the dates, sir. They changed them." The judge stared at him. "Changed them? You mean—" But before he could finish, the lights in the courtroom suddenly cut out, plunging everyone into darkness. People screamed. Papers scattered. A strange thud echoed across the room. Something or someone had just happened in that blackout. And the real chaos was only beginning. The darkness lasted only a few seconds, but it felt like an eternity. In that split second, the courtroom descended into chaos. People shouted. Papers fluttered like startled birds. Someone tripped over a chair. I could hear Karen's panicked breaths behind me. The smell of dust and old wood filled the room. Then, just as suddenly as it had gone out, the lights flickered back on. And that's when I saw it. The envelope that the former HOA employee had placed on the judge's desk was gone. My heart slammed against my chest. Everyone's eyes darted around the room. Karen's mouth opened, then closed, like she was trying to speak but couldn't find the words. The tall man, whose name I learned later was Jeremy, looked pale. He muttered, It was right here." The judge slammed his gavel, trying to restore order. Everyone remained calm. Who took the evidence? No one answered. The room fell into a tense silence, the kind that presses against your chest and makes it hard to breathe. I could see the fear creeping into Karen's eyes, but fear alone doesn't undo wrongdoing. And I knew we were closer than ever to exposing the truth. After what felt like hours, the judge motioned for a court clerk to search the room. Every desk, every chair, every corner, but the envelope had vanished. And with it, the emails, the blueprints, and all the proof that the HOA had knowingly built on land that wasn't theirs. I clenched my fists. I didn't know who could have taken it, but I knew one thing. This wasn't over. A few minutes later, the judge called for another recess. The crowd slowly started to leave the courtroom, murmuring among themselves. I walked out into the hall and felt Jeremy grab my arm. "We need to talk," he whispered. His voice shook, and I could tell he was scared. "There's more you don't know. Karen, she didn't just break the law. She planned everything months in advance, and she's not going to let anyone stop her." I swallowed hard, trying to steady my voice. "What do you mean?" He glanced around nervously. "I mean, she has people watching the courtroom. She's got connections in the county office. If that envelope goes missing, she's going to cover her tracks. She's dangerous." I felt a chill run down my spine. Up until now, I had believed that patience, kindness, and truth would be enough. But Jeremy's words reminded me that this fight was bigger than I imagined. The HOA wasn't just arrogant, they were calculating. We walked outside into the bright sunlight. For a moment, I let myself breathe. I looked across the street at the rows of houses, the lawns freshly mowed, the kids riding bikes, families who had no idea the land beneath their feet wasn't truly theirs. My chest ached, but I told myself, I wasn't fighting them. I was fighting for justice. Jeremy continued, speaking low and fast. "We have a backup plan. There are copies of the emails saved on a server outside the county. But we need access before she finds out. She'll try to sabotage it." I nodded. Every muscle in my body was tense. "Then we do it," I said. "Whatever it takes." But just as we started walking toward my car, a loud crash echoed behind us. We turned. Karen. She had burst out of the courthouse doors, face red, eyes wild. In her hand, she held a small fire extinguisher she had apparently grabbed from the building. She waved it like a weapon, shouting, "You think you can ruin me? Nobody takes Oak Ridge Meadows from me." People scattered. Some screamed. Others ducked. Jeremy shoved me behind a column, pulling me low. I could see Karen's fingers shaking as she pressed the lever, sending a cloud of white powder into the air. The dust choked my lungs. My eyes stung. I coughed violently. By the time I could see again, she was gone, vanished into the crowd. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breathing. Jeremy patted my shoulder. "She's dangerous," he said again. "And now she knows we're onto her." That was when I realized something terrifying. The courthouse blackout, the missing envelope, and now this display of aggression. It wasn't random. Every action had been calculated. Every move had been meant to intimidate us, to make us give up. But I wasn't going to give up. Not now. Not after all I had endured. That evening, I returned to my land. I walked the boundaries quietly, my boots crunching in the dirt. I looked at the 88 houses shining in the fading sunlight. The smell of freshly cut grass mixed with the faint scent of my old barn. My grandfather's words echoed in my mind. Land is not just soil, Tom. It's trust. It's legacy. It's life. I clenched the old deed in my pocket. I couldn't let her win. Not Karen. Not the HOA. And yet, a shadow lingered over me, a fear that if we weren't careful, all evidence, all proof, could disappear like the envelope. I walked to the edge of my pond and stared at the water, thinking about the next steps. We had to strike carefully. We had to be smart. One wrong move could mean losing everything. And just as I turned to go back to the barn, I heard it. The sound of tires crunching on gravel. Slow, deliberate. I froze. The hair on my arms stood up. Someone was coming, and then I saw them. 2 SUVs, black as night, moving toward my property, windows tinted. No plates, no sound other than the engines, and my heartbeat pounding in my ears. This wasn't just a battle over land anymore. This was personal. And as I stepped back, clutching the deed, I realized one thing. The next move would decide everything. I barely had time to react before the SUVs stopped at the edge of my property. The black engines gleamed in the fading sunlight, reflecting the last streaks of orange across my land. My stomach churned. I had no idea who was inside or what they wanted, but instinct told me they were not here to negotiate politely. Jeremy stepped up beside me, his face pale. "They're here for the deed," he said, voice low. "They know you have it. They know we're trying to expose Karen and the HOA. This isn't random." I swallowed hard, glancing down at the deed I had hidden in my jacket pocket. The paper felt heavier than ever, weighted with every memory of my grandfather, and every injustice the HOA had committed. "Then we don't let them get it," I said, though my voice shook. The SUVs stopped, but the engines idled, a low growl that seemed to fill the entire property. Dust from the gravel swirled around them, making the scene even more tense. 2 men stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in black from head to toe. Their faces were obscured by sunglasses, even though it was dusk. One of them carried what looked like a metal briefcase. Jeremy hissed. "Private security. Hired by Karen, most likely." My mind raced. I had prepared for a courtroom battle. I had prepared for legal tricks and intimidation. But this armed men on my land was beyond anything I had imagined. One of them spoke, his voice cold. "Mr. Howard, step away from the deed, hand it over." I planted my feet firmly. "You don't take what isn't yours." He laughed, short and sharp, like a blade scraping metal. "We do today." Before I could react further, Jeremy grabbed my arm. "Come on. There's a path behind the barn. We can get to the back road." I nodded and we sprinted toward the barn, the tall grass whipping against our legs. I could hear the SUVs start moving, tires crunching faster as they followed. Dust clouds rose behind them. Inside the barn, the familiar smell of hay and old wood enveloped me. I leaned against a support beam, trying to catch my breath. "Do they really think they can just take it?" I whispered. Jeremy shook his head. "They don't think, Tom. They follow orders." I looked around the barn, spotting old farming tools, stacks of hay bales, and the cracked wooden floorboards that had supported generations. I realized the barn wasn't just shelter, it was a fortress of memories, a place where I could regroup and plan my next move. The sound of engines grew louder outside, closer. I peered through a crack in the barn wall. One SUV stopped near the barn, and 2 men got out, scanning the perimeter. I whispered to Jeremy, "We can't stay here. We need to get to the deed. If they find it..." He nodded, already moving toward the back exit. "Follow me. Stay quiet." We slipped through a side door that led to a narrow path behind the barn. The evening air hit us, cold and sharp, making every heartbeat loud. I glanced back. One of the men was searching the barn, swinging a flashlight through the cracks. He didn't see us. Not yet. We ran through the trees, past the old pond, and toward the far edge of my property where the undergrowth was thickest. Every step felt dangerous, but I held on to the deed like it was my lifeline. Suddenly, a branch snapped behind us. Both Jeremy and I froze. My heart felt like it would explode. The SUVs had stopped again. I could hear footsteps approaching, deliberate, heavy, searching. Jeremy grabbed my arm. "We need to hide, now." We ducked into a thicket near the edge of the pond. The water reflected the fading light, shimmering like molten gold. I crouched, holding the deed close to my chest, feeling every muscle tense. I could hear Karen's voice yelling from the distance. "He can't escape! Find him!" It wasn't just about the deed anymore. Karen had crossed a line. She had brought threats and intimidation onto private land, and I knew she would stop at nothing to protect her lies. Minutes passed. The SUVs eventually drove away, leaving only the echo of tires in the distance. My legs trembled, but I didn't relax. I knew this was only the beginning. Jeremy whispered, "They'll be back, and next time, they won't come empty-handed." I nodded. The weight of responsibility pressed down on me. My grandfather's words rang in my mind again. Land is not just soil, Tom. It's trust, it's legacy, it's life. I realized I wasn't just protecting a piece of property. I was protecting justice, truth, and the memories of generations who had worked this land before me. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the shadows of the 88 houses stretched long across my fields. The families inside were unaware of the danger looming behind their quiet, manicured lawns. I looked down at the deed, feeling a surge of resolve. I would not let fear win. And then, just as Jeremy and I were about to leave the pond area, a sound froze me in my tracks. A sudden explosion shook the far side of my property. Flames licked the sky, smoke rising above the trees. My barn, my sanctuary, was on fire. I could barely comprehend it. The smell of burning wood and hay filled the air. The heat radiated toward us, forcing us to back away. I looked at Jeremy, eyes wide. "The barn," I choked. "It's gone." Jeremy's face was grim. "This is war, Tom." And Karen just escalated. I clenched the deed tighter. Even as the flames consumed the barn, I felt a fierce determination. They could destroy structures. They could try to intimidate me, but they could not destroy the truth. And I knew, deep in my bones, that the next move I made would either expose everything or cost me everything I had fought for. The barn burned like a beacon in the night, orange flames licking the sky and smoke curling high into the clouds. I stood frozen, clutching the deed tightly to my chest. My grandfather's barn, the one that had stood for nearly a century, the one filled with memories of every summer I had spent chasing chickens and stacking hay bales, was gone. Flames reflected in my eyes as the heat radiated across the field. Jeremy grabbed my shoulder. "We have to move, now. If they see us here?" I nodded, though my legs felt heavy as lead. We ran through the tall grass, away from the fire, staying low, letting the shadows hide us. My mind raced. Karen had crossed every line, burning property, threatening us, sending armed men. This was no longer a dispute about ownership. This was about control, intimidation, and fear. We reached the edge of the woods behind my property and ducked into the trees. For a moment, the sound of crackling flames was replaced by silence. Only the distant hum of SUVs patrolling the perimeter reminded us that we weren't safe yet. Jeremy whispered, "We need to figure out our next move. Karen's not going to stop, not now." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. The barn was gone, but the deed was still in my hands. It was small, fragile, yet stronger than anything Karen or her HOA could throw at me. It was proof, and it was mine. We made our way quietly along a hidden path my grandfather had used when he first bought this land. He had always said, "Nature protects those who respect it." I realize now that every creek, every tree, every thicket could serve as a shield if I remembered the land's secrets. As we walked, Jeremy filled me in on what he knew. "I've checked. The backup server with the emails, the blueprints, all the digital proof it's safe. But we can't go near the town without a plan. Karen has people everywhere. Even some officials might be compromised." I frowned. "Then we do this smart. We gather everything and then we bring it all to the court. No more half measures." Jeremy nodded. "Exactly. And we need allies. People who remember the history of this land. Witnesses who can back up the deed and the map Mr. Ellis brought." I thought about Mr. Ellis. The old man had risked so much just to bring one piece of the puzzle forward. And Jeremy, a stranger with courage and loyalty, was risking even more by standing with me now. For the first time since the fight began, I felt a spark of hope. We reached the far end of the property, near the old creek. The water ran quietly, reflecting the moonlight. I knelt down and splashed a handful of cold water on my face. It stung, but it cleared my head. I had to focus. Jeremy tapped his chin. We need a distraction. Something to draw her attention away from the property, long enough for us to secure the backup evidence and get the documents to the court. I nodded. We could use the old storage shed by the east fence. Karen doesn't know about it. If we make it seem like it's important lights, some movement, she'll probably send her people there. Jeremy smiled faintly. That could work. And while she's distracted, we can retrieve the server. We set the plan quickly, moving silently back toward the property. I felt a strange calm amidst the chaos. Months of frustration, of watching my land slowly taken piece by piece, had led to this moment. We weren't just reacting anymore. We were taking control. But as we approached the east fence, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A shadow moved swiftly among the trees, a figure I didn't recognize. Tall, broad, moving silently, too silently. Jeremy stopped. "Who's that?" he whispered. I strained my eyes. The figure wasn't carrying anything obvious, but the way it moved suggested they were trained. Not a neighbor, not a casual observer. And then I realized something worse. The figure was heading straight toward the path we had taken from the barn fire. I swallowed hard. Karen had already escalated once, but this felt different. Someone was hunting us. Someone who knew exactly where we would go. Jeremy's hand shook slightly as he reached for mine. We need to move now, but not straight down the path. Circle back through the creek. They won't expect it. I nodded. Every nerve in my body was on fire. We moved quickly, slipping through the shadows, trying not to make a sound. The water from the creek rose cold around our ankles, but we kept moving. My mind raced with strategies, contingency plans, everything I had ever learned about patience, observation, and careful action. We had survived the SUVs, the barn fire, and Karen's aggression, but now, with an unknown figure tracking us, it became clear. The fight for my land was far from over. And as we reached the far side of the creek, moving under the cover of trees, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. The next confrontation would not just test our courage, it would test our very lives. The creek water rushed past our boots as Jeremy and I crouched low behind a cluster of rocks and reeds. The night air was thick with tension. My chest pounded so loudly I feared the shadowy figure tracking us might hear it. The moon was high, casting long silver streaks across the water, reflecting like shards of glass. Every step forward felt like walking on a wire stretched over an abyss. "Keep low," Jeremy whispered. "We need to get to the old mill road. From there, we can access the backup server location." I nodded silently, gripping the deed tightly in my jacket pocket. It was small, fragile, yet more valuable than anything in the world. My grandfather's words echoed in my mind again. "Trust is fragile, Tom. Protect what is yours without losing yourself in anger." We moved slowly, careful not to make a sound, but then a branch snapped behind us. I froze. Jeremy froze. The shadowy figure emerged from the trees. They were taller than either of us, wearing black clothing that blended seamlessly with the night. Their movement was deliberate, calculated, almost predatory. They didn't speak, didn't make a sound, yet the menace radiating from them was unmistakable. Jeremy whispered urgently, "We need to split. Circle left toward the underbrush. Don't let them see both of us at once." I hesitated for a split second. I didn't want to leave Jeremy, but I knew he was right. We nodded quickly and darted in opposite directions. My heart pounded like a drum, every shadow suddenly a threat, every rustle of leaves a warning. I ran along the creek, the water cold and swirling around my legs. I glanced back once and saw the figure moving smoothly, almost gliding over the terrain. They weren't following normal paths, they knew the land. Someone had scouted this place thoroughly. My stomach dropped. Finally, I ducked behind a fallen tree near the bank, gasping for air. My hands were shaking. The deed felt heavier than ever. I realized that if I lost this, everything would be over. Karen would win, the HOA would keep the 88 homes, and the truth would remain buried. After a moment, I forced myself to move. Carefully, silently, I crawled through the brush, aiming for the old mill road. The road was deserted, cracked, and overgrown in parts, but it provided a clear path toward the location where Jeremy said the backup server was hidden, a nondescript shed on the outskirts of town. I made it to the road and paused to catch my breath. The sound of tires approaching made me freeze. 2 SUVs, black as night, emerged from the distance. My heart sank. Karen had not only sent armed men before, she was still hunting us. And now, she knew exactly where we were. I looked around desperately. The shed wasn't far, but it was exposed. If I tried to run straight there, I'd be seen. I needed another plan. Then I noticed an old stack of crates near a bend in the road. I could hide behind them, wait for the SUVs to pass, and then make a dash for the shed. I darted toward them, pressed myself flat, and held my breath as the vehicles rumbled past. The headlights swept over me, but I stayed hidden, counting to myself. 1, 2, 3, and then they were gone. I exhaled slowly, relief washing over me briefly. But it didn't last. I could hear footsteps fast, precise, coming from the trees. The shadowy figure was still tracking me. I had no choice. I had to make a run for it. I sprinted across the remaining distance, lungs burning, legs trembling, and reached the shed. It was small, forgotten, with peeling paint and a rusty lock. I fumbled with the key Jeremy had given me. My hands shook, but finally, it clicked. Inside, the server hummed quietly. I opened the door and lifted it carefully. Every nerve in my body was alert. I could hear movement outside the SUVs, the men, the shadowy figure. Any second, they could be on me. I tucked the server under my arm and prepared to exit when a loud voice rang out. "Tom Howard!" I froze. Karen's voice. Clear, sharp, furious. I ran. I dashed through the undergrowth, the server clutched to my chest, the deed in my pocket. Branches whipped against my face. My boots slipped on wet soil, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. Suddenly, a figure stepped out from the shadows ahead. Not just any figure, the tall, black-clad tracker. They blocked my path. I skidded to a halt, my chest heaving. Jeremy's voice came from behind me. "Tom, move left, now!" I veered sharply, knocking over a small bush. The tracker stumbled, and I took the chance, sprinting past him into a narrow corridor of trees. My legs burned, my lungs screamed. But I could hear Jeremy up ahead, calling for me. We didn't stop until we reached the far side of the woods. The SUVs had not followed us completely. They weren't willing to enter the dense forest. We were safe, at least for now. I sank to my knees. The server and deed both secure. For the first time that night, I allowed myself to breathe. The fight was far from over. Karen was still out there, still dangerous, and the courtroom battle was approaching. But in that moment, I realized something vital. We had the power now. The truth was in our hands, and nothing could take it away if we were smart enough to protect it. And just as I looked up, thinking we were safe, I noticed something in the distance. A single figure standing on the hill above the creek, watching, waiting. The figure on the hill stood perfectly still, a dark silhouette against the silver moonlight. My chest tightened, adrenaline spiking. It wasn't just anyone. This wasn't one of the random men Karen had sent. The way they stood, scanning the land, they were deliberate, like a predator watching prey. I could feel their eyes piercing through the darkness, sizing me up, calculating. Jeremy whispered beside me, his voice tense. "They're not alone. Karen's smart. She's not just sending goons. She's controlling every move from afar. That figure is probably her top enforcer, the one she trusts to handle problems." I swallowed hard. "Problems? You mean us?" He nodded grimly. "Exactly. And that's not a threat. That's reality." The woods around us were eerily quiet, as if nature itself was holding its breath. Every rustle of leaves, every snapping twig, made me flinch. The deed and the backup server weighed heavily in my hands. The truth was close, so close I could almost taste it, but Karen was relentless. She wanted to stop it all, and now she had eyes on us from the hill. I clenched the deed. My grandfather's words came to me again. Land is more than soil. It's trust. It's life. Protect it, even when the world seems against you. I felt a surge of determination. We had survived fires, armed men, stolen evidence, and SUV chases. We weren't about to let a shadow scare us off. Jeremy scanned the area. "We need to move quietly, stick to the underbrush. If we keep low, we can get to the creek and circle around the hill without being seen." I nodded, crouching lower. The water of the creek reflected the moon, and I realized it would also work as cover if we timed our movements correctly. As we crept along the path, every sound seemed amplified. A bird flapped suddenly, wings hitting the night air. My heart jumped, leaves rustled behind us, and I froze, thinking the figure on the hill had moved. But it didn't. Someone else was out there. Another shadow? Or a trick of the moonlight? I couldn't tell. We reached a denser part of the forest where the trees twisted over the creek, creating a natural tunnel. I paused for a second, listening. The hill above was quiet now. The figure hadn't moved. But I could sense them watching, waiting for a mistake. Jeremy whispered urgently, We can't stop here. Keep moving, follow me. We sprinted carefully through the tunnel, the creek water cold on our legs. Every step, I felt the weight of what we were carrying: the server, the deed, the truth. It was all in our hands, but it was also all vulnerable. One wrong step, and everything could be lost. As we emerged from the natural tunnel, we reached a small clearing. The moonlight illuminated the creek bending around an old, abandoned boathouse. This was our chance to hide for a few minutes, catch our breath, and plan the next move. I sank onto the wooden steps of the boathouse, trying to steady my breathing. Jeremy crouched beside me, eyes scanning every movement in the shadows. "We're not safe yet," he said. "Karen's figure is still on the hill. I can see them, barely, but they haven't left. They're waiting for us to make a move." I nodded. I realized then how calculated Karen had been. Every fire, every SUV chase, every stolen envelope, it was all designed to make me panic, to force a mistake. But we hadn't made a mistake. Not yet. Suddenly, Jeremy's gaze sharpened. "Wait. Look at that." I followed his finger. Far in the distance, along the edge of the field where the 88 houses stood, I saw movement lights flickering in a pattern, almost like signals. Karen wasn't just sending people to chase us. She was coordinating, communicating with others to monitor the property, the land, the creek. It was an army, and we were alone. My stomach dropped. The scale of this was bigger than I imagined. It wasn't just a legal battle or a property dispute anymore. Karen had turned this into a war, and every move we made would be watched. But I clenched the deed tighter. We had survived this long. We had outsmarted the SUVs, the barn fire, and the shadow trackers. And now, we had an even clearer goal: retrieve the evidence, protect the deed, and expose the truth in court, no matter the cost. Jeremy looked at me, determination in his eyes. "We move at dawn. Under cover of low light, we can make it to the town undetected and secure the server before Karen knows what's happening." I nodded, feeling a strange mix of fear and resolve. Every extreme event, every threat had led us to this moment. And I realized that in all of this chaos, I had learned something vital. Kindness and patience don't mean weakness. They mean endurance, strategy, and understanding when to fight and when to wait. We stayed in the boathouse until the moon dipped lower and darkness softened. Every sound in the night was a reminder. Karen was relentless. Her reach was long. But we had survived impossible odds before. And as the first faint hints of dawn began to glow on the horizon, I realized one terrifying truth. The next encounter would not just be dangerous, it would decide everything. Karen wouldn't stop. She would escalate. And we had to be ready. From the hill, the shadow figure watched still, patient, waiting. Dawn broke slowly, painting the sky in streaks of pale pink and orange. The forest around the creek seemed almost peaceful in the soft morning light, but the danger from last night still lingered in the air. Jeremy and I crouched in the boathouse, the deed and the server resting safely between us, though the weight of responsibility pressed heavily on our shoulders. Every rustle of leaves, every bird's call, made us tense. We knew Karen hadn't slept. She was already mobilizing, already planning her next move. "We move now," Jeremy whispered, his voice firm. "Low light, careful steps. The server is intact, but Karen will escalate if she notices anything missing from the courthouse evidence. She's not just a lawyer, she's ruthless." I nodded. My fingers tightened around the deed. Every month, every setback, every small victory had led to this point. I felt the determination that had carried me through SUV chases, stolen envelopes, and the barn fire settle into a steady resolve. This was no longer about revenge. This was about justice, legacy, and protecting the truth. We moved quietly along the edge of the creek, taking a zigzagging path Jeremy had scouted the night before. The shadows of the trees stretched long across the ground, masking our movement. I glanced back once. The hill where the shadowy figure had stood was empty, no sign of our tracker, but I knew that didn't mean Karen wasn't watching. She was smarter than that. She had anticipated our moves. As we neared the edge of my property, the familiar shapes of the 88 houses loomed ahead. Their neat lawns, bright paint, and cheerful early morning light made my chest tighten. These homes were the culmination of Karen's scheme. Yet, to their owners, they were just houses safe, ordinary, unaware that the land beneath them wasn't fully hers to give. I felt a mix of sorrow and urgency. Every step I took, I carried the responsibility not just for myself, but for all the people living on my land without knowing it. Jeremy stopped suddenly, crouching behind a cluster of bushes. "There's a car coming. Black sedan, tinted windows. It's slow, but it's checking the area. They're looking for us. I held my breath. The car moved slowly down the road, scanning, as if following an invisible line only Karen could see. We stayed still, pressed low, and waited. Minutes felt like hours. Eventually, the sedan passed, tires crunching softly on gravel, and we exhaled in quiet relief. We continued toward the town, sticking to underbrush and shadows. The server hummed quietly in my backpack, the deed tucked safely in an inner pocket. Jeremy whispered strategies as we moved. We needed to reach the town undetected, get the evidence to a trusted lawyer, and prepare for court. Karen had been unpredictable so far, and we couldn't afford another extreme escalation. Suddenly, a sound shattered the quiet morning, a scream, not far from the edge of the property, near the first row of houses. My heart jumped. Jeremy and I froze. "That's from the neighborhood," Jeremy said, voice tense. "Something's happened." We moved toward the source cautiously, staying low. As we approached, we saw a crowd gathering near one of the houses. Smoke curled into the sky, thin but distinct. Flames were licking the side of the house, a small but growing fire. People screamed and ran for safety, some trying to douse the flames with hoses. I felt a wave of anger and dread. Karen's reach was deeper than I realized. She wasn't just trying to intimidate me, she was now endangering innocent people on my land. Jeremy grabbed my arm. "We need to focus. That's a distraction. If we intervene, it might expose us. We have to reach the lawyer and secure the evidence. It's the only way to stop her for good." I nodded, forcing myself to concentrate. The fire burned behind us as we continued through the underbrush, moving swiftly but quietly toward the edge of town. Every step was measured, every sound controlled. I could feel my heart pounding in my ears, every sense heightened. As we reached the outskirts of town, we encountered a small alleyway leading to a parking lot. Jeremy peered around the corner. "The backup server is in the car, in the lot near the old warehouse. Karen's people don't patrol this area, it's our best chance." We moved cautiously, making sure no one was watching. The morning sunlight began to climb higher, casting long shadows that hit us well. I could feel the weight of the server and deed, but also the anticipation finally. After months of danger, we were close to securing the evidence that would expose everything. As we reached the parking lot, a chill ran down my spine. Across the lot, partially hidden in the shadows, was the tall figure, the tracker. He hadn't given up. He had anticipated our route, followed us silently, and was waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Jeremy whispered, "We need to act fast. Any hesitation, and he could take the server and the deed. Are you ready?" I swallowed hard, feeling every muscle tense. My mind flashed through every extreme event we had, survived the barn fire, the SUVs, the stolen envelope, the darkness of the courthouse. I realized that if we didn't move now, all that struggle would be for nothing. The figure took a step forward, and that's when I made my decision. We would run, fight, and take back control. The figure across the parking lot didn't move immediately, but his presence was a heavy weight on the air between us. Every instinct in my body screamed danger. He wasn't just waiting, he was calculating, predicting our next move. Jeremy nudged me slightly, whispering, "We can't hesitate. If he blocks the server, we're finished. Move fast, take the left flank." I nodded, feeling the adrenaline surge. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it could burst through my chest. The deed in my pocket burned with significance. This paper, fragile and old, carried the truth of my family's land and Karen's corruption. I couldn't let it fall into the wrong hands. The server under my arm hummed quietly, full of proof that could topple the entire HOA scheme. We bolted simultaneously, Jeremy and I splitting to either side of a row of stacked crates near the edge of the lot. The figure reacted instantly, stepping forward, moving faster than I expected. I ducked behind a dumpster, my breathing ragged. The morning sun glinted off the black leather of his gloves as he reached for a small device in his belt. Panic threatened to rise in me, but I forced myself to think clearly. This wasn't just about running, it was about strategy. I had survived countless extreme events, barn fire, stolen envelope, armed SUVs, and each had taught me something vital. I had to stay calm, even as the tracker closed the distance. Jeremy's voice came from my left, low and urgent. "Now Tom, run to the alley." I bolted, skidding across loose gravel, the server bouncing against my side. The figure lunged, and I felt a brief tug at my jacket, but I wrenched free and kept moving. Dust kicked up around us, and I heard the clatter of metal and the muted curse from the tracker. We dove into the narrow alleyway, the walls on either side providing cover. My lungs burned, my legs screamed, but every second we gained distance brought us closer to safety. We emerged near the back of an old warehouse, the sun climbing higher and painting long shadows across the cracked pavement. The warehouse door was slightly ajar. Jeremy pulled it open wider, and we slipped inside, finally able to catch a breath. The smell of dust and oil hung thick in the air. Piles of crates and boxes created a maze of cover, but I didn't relax. Karen's tracker could have followed us, and if he had, we'd be cornered immediately. I leaned against a crate, panting, and Jeremy quickly checked the perimeter. "We're clear for now," he said. "But he's smart. He's not gone. He's probably circling the lot, waiting for a mistake." I looked down at the server in my hands, and then at the deed in my pocket. Relief washed over me momentarily, but it was tempered by the knowledge that this was only part of the fight. The evidence had to get to a trusted lawyer, then to the court, and Karen would stop at nothing to prevent that. Jeremy whispered, "We need to move it to the lawyer's office today. It's risky, but if we delay, she'll anticipate it. She already burned the barn, sent SUVs, stole documents. She escalates fast." I nodded. Every extreme event so far had proven Karen's willingness to destroy anything to protect herself, but we had survived because we had patience, careful planning, and determination. That thought steeled me. We began moving through the warehouse, carefully avoiding creaking floorboards and loose boxes. The path to the exit was clear, but as we approached, a shadow passed in the doorway behind us. I froze. Jeremy motioned for silence, and we crouched low, blending into the shadows. The warehouse door opened slightly, and a figure Karen's tracker peeked inside. His eyes scanned the room, trained, sharp. He didn't see us. Not yet. We waited, holding our breath. Every second felt like an eternity. Then, when he turned to leave, Jeremy whispered, "Now, go." We dashed through the exit, sticking to the walls of the alley, using every shadow to mask our movement. The morning traffic on the town street provided cover as we moved swiftly toward the lawyer's office. My chest ached from running, my legs were sore, but the deed and server were secure. Finally, the lawyer's office came into view. A modest building with a sturdy door. Jeremy knocked in the code we had memorized, and the door swung open. Inside, we were greeted by a trusted lawyer who had agreed to handle the case. I handed him the server and the deed, my hands trembling. "Everything. Proof. Emails, blueprints. It's all here," I said, voice shaking. He nodded solemnly. "We'll secure it immediately. Nothing will touch this. And with this evidence, the court will have no choice but to recognize your claim." For a moment, relief washed over me. Months of fear, threats, and extreme events, the barn fire, SUVs, stolen evidence, trackers in the woods, all seemed to converge to this moment. But even in relief, a shadow of doubt lingered. Karen was relentless. She wouldn't give up so easily. And then, as we caught our breath, a loud crash echoed from the street outside. Windows rattled, the sound of metal and shouts. My heart skipped a beat. Jeremy whispered urgently, "That's her. Karen. She's not finished yet." I clenched my fists. Every extreme, every threat, every moment of danger had led us to this point, and I realized one undeniable truth. The final confrontation was coming. The crash outside was deafening. I pressed myself against the wall of the lawyer's office, clutching the deed and the server as if they were life itself. Jeremy crouched beside me, eyes wide, scanning the windows. The sound of shattered glass and screeching tires echoed through the street. My mind raced. Karen had found us. After everything, the barn fire, the SUVs, the tracker, the fires in the neighborhood, she had escalated one last time. The lawyer hurried to secure the door with extra locks, his hands shaking. "We'll keep this place secure," he said, voice tense. "But you need to be ready. Karen won't stop until she's either destroyed the evidence or destroyed you." I swallowed hard. Months of fear and planning, danger and uncertainty, had led to this moment. Every extreme event, the barn fire, the SUV chase, the shadowy tracker, the burned house in the neighborhood, had been a test. And now, the final confrontation was here. Jeremy whispered, "We have to move the server to the courthouse. If we leave it here, she'll find a way to sabotage it. We can't risk it." I nodded, though the thought of stepping back into the open, knowing Karen's forces were out there, made my stomach twist. But I had no choice. Everything hinged on the court recognizing the deed and the evidence. We waited until the immediate chaos outside subsided slightly. Then, carefully, we moved through the back alley, hugging the shadows, keeping low. The street was littered with shards of glass, overturned trash cans, and signs of Karen's fury. It was clear. She had sent reinforcements, and the town itself was feeling the shockwaves of her campaign. Jeremy led the way to a small car parked inconspicuously behind a diner. I climbed in with the server indeed, hands trembling. The engine started quietly, and we moved slowly, avoiding the main roads where Karen's people could be watching. Every turn, every intersection, felt like a potential trap. We reached the courthouse just as the morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the steps. I could see officers milling around, but no one recognized the immediate danger we carried. The building loomed, imposing and silent, as if waiting for the battle to unfold within. Jeremy parked the car, and we carried the server and deed inside, navigating the echoing halls with caution. The courthouse smelled of polished wood, ink, and the faint tang of fear from past legal battles fought here. We moved quickly toward the clerk's office, where our trusted lawyer had arranged for secure evidence storage before the hearing. Inside the clerk's office, I set the server and deed down, my hands shaking. The lawyer checked everything carefully, ensuring that all files, emails, and blueprints were intact. Relief washed over me in a wave, but it was fleeting. We were still vulnerable. Karen had shown time and again that she would escalate, that she would destroy everything if she felt cornered. Then, suddenly, the courthouse doors burst open. Karen herself strode in, face pale with fury, eyes blazing with the same cold determination that had haunted me for months. Behind her, a few of her associates flanked her, some holding papers, others simply menacingly quiet. "Tom Howard," she hissed, voice echoing through the marble hall. "You think you can take what's mine? Those 88 homes belong to me. The HOA protects my claim." I stood my ground, holding the deed firmly. Jeremy's hand rested on my shoulder, a silent anchor of support. My voice was steady, despite the fear twisting in my chest. "You're wrong. The deed proves the land belongs to my family. You've built 88 homes illegally, and now the truth will come out." Karen's eyes narrowed. "You'll regret this." She advanced, but a security officer stepped forward, blocking her path. The tension in the room was palpable. Every witness, every official, every clerk felt the weight of the moment. Our lawyer moved quickly, submitting the server and deed into the courthouse's secure evidence system. "It's protected now," he said firmly. "No one can touch this." Karen stopped in her tracks, realizing that for the first time, her control was slipping. She had underestimated our patience, our planning, and the weight of truth. I felt a surge of triumph, tempered by the lingering adrenaline of months of extreme events, fires, threats, stolen evidence, and near captures. Every obstacle we had faced had led to this moment. For a long moment, we just stood there, the courthouse silent except for the soft hum of the secure server. Karen's fury was palpable, but it could not undo the reality we had created. The deed, the server, the proof they were safe, and the legal battle was about to begin. I realized then that all the fear, all the danger, all the nights spent hiding and running, had not been in vain. Justice, patience, and courage had carried us through. We had survived every extreme event, faced every threat, and still stood ready to fight for what was right. Karen glared at me one last time before she was escorted out by security. Her threats echoed faintly, but I knew they held no power anymore. The deed was safe, the evidence was secure, and the truth would finally be revealed. Jeremy exhaled, relief and exhaustion etched across his face. "We did it," he whispered. I nodded, looking down at the deed, remembering my grandfather's words. "Land is not just soil. It's trust. It's life. Protect it." Today we had protected both, not just for ourselves, but for every family, every memory, and every piece of truth Karen tried to bury. Outside the courthouse, the morning light felt like freedom. The fires, the chaos, the SUV chases, the tracker in the shadows, they were all behind us. For the first time, I allowed myself to believe we had truly won. And as the doors closed behind us, I realized something important. Justice isn't just about winning. It's about patience, courage, and the willingness to protect what is right, no matter the cost. Where are you watching from?